Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to the 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast.
Go Blue, and welcome to our Michigan Game Day show. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. With us today is one of our favorites, Chris Balas from the Wolverine, with his always candid thoughts on Michigan football. First, a few of my thoughts before Chris joins us. The quarterback competition is over, so now JJ can take the field on Saturday knowing he is the man. I think everyone is glad Jim decided to make the decision now and not let this linger into Big Ten play. From all reports this week, Cade is handling the decision like a captain should. He's working hard and staying ready. As Jim said, we're really fortunate to have two outstanding quarterbacks. You never know what can happen in a long season. Knowing that Cade is your backup, that is more than a luxury. This week we finished the non-conference portion of the schedule. I'm sure UConn is better than Hawaii, maybe even on par with Colorado State, but they are still not a good team right now. If we take care of business like we should, this will be another opportunity, and probably our last this season, to get a lot of players some experience. Jim Mora is in his first year as head man at UConn. He is a good football coach, but he has a massive rebuilding job in front of him. Our guest today says this is the last of our so-called tomato can games. Win, stay healthy, and get better, as Jim says, is what we need to do this Saturday. Up next on our game day edition of the show is Chris Balas from the Wolverine. So stay with us. Here with us on our game day segment this week to talk about what we've seen so far through the first two games and then this Saturday against Connecticut is Chris Balas from the Wolverine. Great to have you back again, Chris.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me, brother.
Well, Chris, let's start by talking about J.J. McCarthy. That seems to be what everyone wants to talk about. He's won the starting job, and man, in the first two games at least, he looked picture perfect, didn't he?
Yeah, rightfully so. And you know what? They did it right. You know what? They opened it up, and Jim Harbaugh said that it's going to go through the first couple of games here, and let's see. J.J. McCarthy really turned it on at the end of camp to the point that, you know, everybody that we talked to in the building said, hey, it looks like Cade McNamara is probably going to be the first guy to get the start, and, you know, J.J.'s still pushing him, and he's going to continue to push until Big Ten season. And then that last scrimmage came around, and J.J. McCarthy took his game to another level. Now, he might have gotten there earlier, if we're being honest about it, if he'd been able to play through the spring. He had that shoulder injury and cost him 15 practices, but he got caught up quickly. And the kid, we've seen it. We knew it covering him in high school that he had the potential to be a special quarterback, and we're starting to see that. Now there are bigger tests to come. Hawaii is not the standard. And I always go back, and I've said this on several shows, Mike, you go back to John Navarro when he took over for Drew Henson in 2000, and he came out against Bowling Green and Rice, and I think he completed like 28 of 35 and had 8 touchdowns and no interceptions, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, is Drew Henson going to get his job back? Then he goes out to the coast and lays an egg at UCLA when he played a team with a pulse. And I do not, to be very clear, anticipate that happening with J.J. McCarthy. All I'm saying is that, like Jim Harbaugh was saying in the post-game press conference, pump the brakes a little bit on NFL talk and this and that. Let's let this kid continue to play and continue to grow. But you can see the skill set, and it's a skill set like we really haven't seen here before. I guess Devin Gardner would probably qualify, the runner and the passer, but I think J.J. McCarthy is a better runner and really a more polished runner in that respect and more natural runner. So, and the ball he threw against Hawaii, he should have been 12 for 12 if Ronnie Bell doesn't drop a pass, and they were on the money. And that's one thing you can tell is ball placement and poise and things like that, and he's got that in spades. So sky seems to be the limit for this kid. We'll see what happens when he goes to Iowa. We'll see even against Maryland when he's playing with better athletes, but you love everything you've seen from the kid so far.
Well, do you think it's best for all concerned that Jim made that decision after week 2 and not let this linger into October and the Big Ten season?
100%, and only because Cade McNamara didn't really rise to the challenge, and unfortunately, and they were stunned. He had a really, really good fall camp, and he had a good, he had a good summer. He's a great leader, and they expected this thing to be much closer than it was. But you could tell from the get-go against Colorado State that Cade McNamara was feeling the pressure. And for everybody who said, "Oh no, that's just Cade being Cade," come on, people. Give him some credit for what he accomplished last year and in some of his better games. You don't go to Nebraska and Penn State and win games like that. And I understand about the running game and the defense and so on and so forth, but it takes good quarterback play too to win a Big Ten championship. And he provided that at times. So he took a significant step back. So there was really no question about it. And Jim Harbaugh said, based on merit, there's no question that JJ is our guy right now, and he's 100% right to do it because, frankly, you see that Cade McNamara has lost his confidence, and it's unfortunate. They might need him at some point this year. You hope not. You hope that it's one guy here and that JJ McCarthy goes the entire way and becomes the quarterback that we think he can be, but it's better to have two than one. And so when you hear the boos and you see him lose his confidence, that's not good for him, and it's certainly not good for the team. So you hope he gets that back, but I don't think there's any question that Jim Harbaugh made the right decision after week 2.
With Cade, he's a gamer. It's like Jim said, he has gravel in his gut, and keep in mind, you might need Cade down the road, so he has to, get it back together, and, his teammates elected him captain. He's going to come around. Yeah,
I think so. And it's hard to watch, right? The human element of it when you see him in the body language. And I did not like his reaction after week 1, when he came out in the press conference and said, well, I thought it was my job and I was surprised and so on and so forth. Those aren't the words of a captain, and I think he'll learn from that. But I think there was some frustration there. I don't think there's any question, A, about the way he played, and B, understanding, he's got this talent behind him that is just, we said even before the year started that it wouldn't stun anybody if J.J. McCarthy turned out to be the guy because he's just that talented. So here you are, and you've waited your turn, and you've led a Big Ten championship, and I would imagine that Cade's thinking, man, especially when you hear the boos, where's the appreciation for that? And, he's listening to everybody say, oh, it was Hassan Haskins who did it, or, giving everybody credit but him. So it's tough. These kids are still human, and I do think he'll bounce back, and I still think he'll have some good moments in a Michigan uniform, but it's clear that the talent, the actual physical talent is J.J. McCarthy, and he's got it between the ears, too. This is a great kid who works just as hard as Cade McNamara, too, so he's going to be tough to unseat at this point.
Well, Chris, let's talk about this team and what we've seen through the first 2 games, get your take on it. And I know, like you, I love to watch the line play. When I watch the tape on it, I focus on line play, too. How have the big guys looked to you so far?
Yeah, I like the run blocking. I think has been outstanding. I was watching Oluwatimi at center the first couple of snaps, just blowing people off the ball, and I'm thinking, boy, that really is going to be an upgrade. That interior line, those guys are road graders, and a little disappointed in the pass protection. I'll be honest. Trente Jones at right tackle needs to shore that up. He needs to be better. I think we kind of took for granted that he was going to be as good as Andrew Stuber, and we probably shouldn't have, because Stuber was an outstanding lineman. Now he's more suited to play inside at guard, but he was outstanding at right tackle last year, and Trente Jones needs to improve there. They had a couple of leaks, I guess is what Jim Harbaugh called them, when Cade McNamara was on the field against Hawaii. Zach Zinner gave up a sack, and then Ryan Hayes, your left tackle, who's been there forever, gave up a sack. Trente Jones, all on the same drive, on the same possession. That can't happen against the better teams on the schedule, and these guys have played too much football to be getting beat one-on-one by guys from Hawaii, so they need to shore that up. But as far as the run blocking goes, I think it's outstanding, and it's only going to get better as these guys continue to play together.
Blake Corum's been really, really good so far, as expected, and I'd like to see more reps for Donovan Edwards. I know they're saying he's maybe nursing an injury right now, but, in that backfield, the surprise to me so far has been C.J. Stokes. I mean, he looks fast. He hits those holes fast and low. I like what I see from him, Chris.
I like him a lot, and I agree with you on Corum. People keep asking me, did he lose a step because he added 12 pounds? And I said, I don't think so. We haven't really seen him in the open field yet. And that's one thing that I know Mike Hart, Michigan's running backs coach, wanted to see more of. He wants to see some more explosion, some more explosive plays, break a tackle maybe, or make the last guy miss. We saw some more of that against Hawaii, but they were so bad defensively, Mike. It's kind of hard to tell, how much of that was Michigan and how much of that was just Hawaii being so bad. So we'll see more of that, and I want to see more of Donovan Edwards too, and finding ways to get him the ball. That guy, as a dual threat guy, a receiver and a runner, is outstanding. And I said before the season, though, I want to see how he does between the tackles, and I think that's still a work in progress. He doesn't look like that natural running back between the tackles. It's something that he's going to have to continue to learn. He's more of a Marshall Faulk type running back, where you can throw it to him 10 times out of the backfield like they did last year against Maryland. So, but they have the weapons, and Stokes, this is a kid who was flying under the radar, and asked Mike Hart about him last week, and he said, I recruit football players, not just stars, and you can see that in C.J. Stokes. He's a workhorse. He's got good acceleration, and he's going to be a really good Big Ten back. There's no question about it. So I think that's probably one of the reasons that Kalel Mullings moved strictly back to linebacker. He had been playing a little bit of running back in the spring and then maybe to start the fall, but you've got that third back now, and hopefully he can be that guy that moves the chains a little bit, and a couple of these guys. So I really like what I've seen from that running back room so far.
And as far as the receivers go, Roman Wilson has stood out, given the fact, look who we played the first two games. We have been running a lot of receivers in there. I'd like to see more of Andrel Anthony. Really doesn't seem to have gotten a lot of reps so far, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, who do you think the rotation is going to be there, Chris?
Yeah, great questions. Cornelius Johnson came on strong, and it is interesting, right, when you see a quarterback throwing the ball downfield like J.J. McCarthy, what these guys are capable of. And Johnson had a couple of big plays, and we talked about Donovan Edwards. That throw and catch down the sideline, that's next level stuff there.
Oh, yeah.
First the throw and then the catch. So Edwards can actually play some there, and I think you're going to see him split out at times. We saw it quite a bit against Hawaii even. So Ronnie Bell has got to get his hands back, and I think he will. Here's a guy that struggled early in his career with the drops, and he's had a few in the first couple of games. That can't happen again against the better teams on the schedule, and I think he'll come around. He's still coming back from that knee injury, so maybe he's thinking about getting hurt, but we know that what Ronnie Bell can do. I still think he's going to be this team's leading receiver. I do. I just think he's with the route running and his ability to get open, and he's a trustworthy guy. I think you're going to see that. Him and I think Cornelius Johnson are going to be the two, and then after that, Roman Wilson's right up there with him. The thing about Roman Wilson is now that he's becoming that deep threat, he's getting off the line better. We always knew he had the speed. Now he's showing that ability that he can be that deep threat. Even though he's not a real big guy, he's got that speed to get behind defenses. So I think those are your big three. But I do want to see more of Anthony too. I'm right there with you. I want to see more opportunities for him, and he should get those. This is a kid who had a huge game last year against Michigan State, and he's got all the ability in the world. And another thing is, you don't want these guys to get discouraged, right? So I'm not saying that, hey, you need to throw to this guy to keep him happy, but there are ways to get him involved in the offense. So, but it's a deep room, and that's the good news. And one of the reasons that they've been able to move freshman Amori and Walker over to play both ways, and why you were able to move Mike Sainristil over from receiver to nickelback, where he's been outstanding so far in the early going.
Another guy I'd like to see get a few more targets is Eric All. I know we've been running a lot of tight ends into the game through the first two, but Like I told you, I like to focus on line blocking, and I could watch that guy block all day. He has been beautiful.
Yeah, he loves to hit people, and I pop in tape of that Ohio State game sometimes when I want to get a smile on my face and watch him blowing people off the ball. I really do, because he's that good, and he's kind of a freak of nature in terms of what he can do at his size. We saw it against Penn State last year when he outran their defense on one leg for the game-winning touchdown. So I agree with you there too, and I think there are going to be more opportunities for that, Mike. But you know what? They got to get through this tomato can portion of the schedule here where, hey, you could run every time probably and beat these first three teams on the schedule. And but with J.J. McCarthy, again, you're going to have more opportunities to go downfield too. So I think you're going to see all of these guys used in the offense here as we get to the Iowas, the Penn States, the Michigan States. But right now, they're getting a lot of guys time. I think they played well over 100 people against Hawaii. These are kids that aren't going to be able to play later in the season. So I like what they're doing and how they're doing it right now.
Well, let's talk about Jesse Mitter's defense for just a couple of minutes, Chris. They have looked really good so far, and granted, the competition hasn't been the best, but even after taking that into consideration, the D has been really impressive, haven't they?
Yeah, and you can tell the way they run to the ball and the way they play together. You can tell some things, even against crappy offenses, Mike, that, okay, there are certain things that these guys do well. Number one, they don't loaf. They get to the ball. These guys hit hard. They play with aggression. Jalen Harrell has been an absolute stud here in the early going. That defensive line, we want to see how they do it when they go up against a team that wants to run right at them. There aren't a whole lot of those anymore, it seems like. But, they seem to be stout on the interior. Chris Jenkins is off to a great start. You can point to any one of those guys and say, wow, what a great start he's had. Even Ayabi Anoma, the transfer, on his first snap, he gets a sack. He's around the ball, and but you can tell these guys play well together, and you can tell it's like year two in the same defense. Even though it's not Jesse Minter's second year, it's a very similar defense, and that was why it was such a great hire when you had Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter, who had both played or coached together in the past, and they basically run the same stuff with a few variations. That was really important, and you can tell that these guys are comfortable in it. Junior Colson has taken that step at linebacker as a sophomore. He's going to be an all-Big Ten guy, probably an All-American next year before he's done. So, and then that back end is playing well too. You lose Brad Hawkins and Dax Hill, but like I talked about Sainristil, Jim Harbaugh compared Sainristil to Dax Hill in the way he's playing, and he's not off. Sainristil's been all over the place. So it's fun to watch. There are bigger tests to come. Probably not. Well, I guess, Maryland's going to swing it around a little bit too. So bigger tests. We're going to find out a little bit about this defense, I think, a week from Saturday, Mike, but so far off to a great start.
The defensive front has surprised me, but one in particular, one of our gifts from the football gods, Mason Graham. I mean, that kid looks like a stud already, doesn't he?
Yeah, and, I took some flack in the spring. I said, this kid looks further along as a defensive tackle than any kid at this point in his career that I've ever seen at Michigan. And, you have to remember, this kid was playing in the spring. He's still supposed to be in high school when I said that. And he's lived up to that hype. He holds his own physically, and that's just unheard of for a guy that age. He can come out of high school and to be able to go up against an Olu Atimi and guys like that, Zach Zinter, and hold your own. And he was doing that in the spring, and I said, that's really impressive. Now we're seeing it in games as well. In the first game, he was putting the center back in the quarterback's lap, and he was registering a sack. I like this kid a lot, and I think Kenneth Grant behind him is going to get better and better as well. Kenneth Grant looks more like a freshman. He's got a little bit to learn. He has to learn how to play a little bit lower. But Mason Graham is a former wrestler, and you watch him play, and you think, I can't believe we're going to get that guy for 3 or 4 years. He's just getting started in his career. That just goes to show you how well they've recruited these last two classes, Mike. So as they get caught up in the NIL stuff, these next two classes are going to carry this program through the next 3 years. I have no doubt about that.
Well, that secondary, as you said, Chris, has been rock solid. And you mentioned DJ Turner. He has been so good. But the guy that's getting my attention, and I didn't expect this, is Makari Page. He's so tall. Man, does that kid cover some ground or what?
He does, and now he's starting to hit. And that was what they were waiting for from him. And springs, he'd played well, and in falls, he'd played well. Now, that you're not hitting, in practice for the most part. You do some thud and things like that, but you don't go all out. And then when he would get to games, it's called contact courage. And you know what? He was just not providing it, but now he is. And you see him. We always knew he was an athlete. we always knew they had high hopes for him. And really starting his freshman year, Jim Harbaugh would talk about him and say, this kid's got a bright future. So now we're starting to see it on the football field, and you've got a rotation back there with R.J. Moten, Rod Moore, guys like that really there are several guys back there that you can count on, and these guys are students of the game as well. So really feel great about that safety position, probably better than we have in a long, long time. And that includes last year when you had Dax Hill and Brad Hawkins, who had been there for a long time. These guys are young, they're talented, and really like those guys back there.
Well, so many positives after 2 games, which is always great to get off to a good start. And we know those first 2 games were against inferior opponents, but we took care of business and played really hard for 60 minutes, everyone that got into the game. So when you take that into account, Chris, what have we learned so far about this Michigan team?
Yeah, you know what? That's a good question. And because when the competition is that bad, do you really know what you've got? I've talked to a lot of coaches about that, and it's the same thing. The things that you can tell are, number one, the desire, right? And you can see the guys. When we talked to Mike Elston, for example, Michigan's defensive line coach, he said, you know, I want to see a little bit more block destruction and a little more getting off blocks, but I cannot fault the effort and the want to and the getting to the ball. You can tell that these guys are hungry and that they love playing together, and that there's talent, there's speed on that defense. And on the offense, you can see the playmakers, right? I mean, when you can talk all you want to about, oh, it's just Hawaii, but J.J. McCarthy, it looks effortless when he is out there. And even against Colorado State, you know what, when things break down, he's starting to check down now a little bit instead of forcing things. From, you know, the people that we spoke to in practice, they said there were times that he had a tendency to do that and maybe throw a pick or two. Now he's checking down and making the right plays, and that's what you can tell. So it's going to be a lot different, for example, when he goes to Iowa. Iowa's terrible offensively, but they've got one heck of a defense. So they're going to test him in different ways. That's a kind of defense that wants to make a young quarterback make mistakes. So we're going to find out a lot about him there. But more than anything, you can see that this is a tight-knit group, that these guys like playing together. 2020, for example, was awful, and you could tell in the body language. You can tell, you know, even it was a COVID year, sure, but you could tell those guys didn't like each other, and Ronnie Bell admitted that as much. But these guys like playing together. There's a lot of speed out there, Mike, and a lot of talent, and you can see that. Let's see how it translates against the better teams on the schedule.
Well, Saturday, UConn comes to town, and I guess you could say they're the third mess we've played in a row, and maybe not as bad as Hawaii, but this is another game for us, as Jim says, to get better, win, and stay healthy. Just being really honest, UConn is not a good team right now, are they, Chris?
They aren't. And you mentioned off the air when we were talking, they've got a solid quarterback, a kid who was a winner in high school. He just doesn't have a lot of help, and you can put a good quarterback behind a crappy line. It reminds me of Jimmy Clausen, right, when he first came to Notre Dame and to Michigan Stadium, and boy, they left him hanging out to dry, and I kind of get the feeling that that's what they're doing with this kid. But they're just not good, and it's going to be hard for them to compete in this day and age, you know, with the transfer portal and everything else in NIL. So that's a program that's on the decline, and when they scheduled them, you know, they probably weren't. So, but it's another opportunity, like you said, to get better, and this is stay healthy more than anything. You know, Donovan Edwards, like you said, is banged up. Sounds like it's just an ankle sprain from what we've heard. Don't quote us on that, but it sounds like it's not going to be too serious. So that's good news. But get out of this game healthy, you know, play some guys, and then get ready for Maryland. They're going to be throwing the ball all over the place. That's a team that Michigan's played really well against over the years, and really some of their best games against Maryland. So, but that's the one you're kind of pointing to, and in this one, you're just saying, hey, let's take care of business and get out of there healthy.
Well, I know yesterday when Jim was talking about injuries, there weren't many to talk about. One that I didn't hear mentioned was Eric All. He dinged himself up somehow. He was over on the bike.
Yep.
But have we heard anything about that?
We have not, but he was riding the bike, and I don't think he would have been riding the bike had it been a serious injury. You know, speaking to people on the sidelines, I think they thought that they avoided serious injuries in that game, other than Jalen Perry. I haven't heard anything about Jalen Perry either. So, but yeah, I think All will be fine. I'll be honest. This is one of those games where if you have any doubts about any of these guys, you rest them, right? Yeah. Like you did with Ryan Hayes in the opener. You know, I think you just take the precautions and then prepare for that Maryland game. They're going to win this game handily on Saturday. I think they're, a 46-point favorite now, Mike. I think the combined spread in the first 3 games is 120 points as favorites, which is nuts. But, hey, stay healthy, like I said. Rest the guys that you need to rest, and then prepare for that Big Ten opener. And this is a team, really, Mike, that can run the table going into Ohio State, and that's I don't think that's a stretch to say that. The schedule is very favorable, so let's take care of business. Let's stay healthy, and then move on to Big Ten play.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Chris. Last weekend there were some really crazy upsets and a lot of entertaining games too. Two Big Ten teams went down that somewhat surprised me: Wisconsin and Iowa. And as you mentioned, Iowa has absolutely no offense right now. We have 10 weeks left, but it sure looks like we are in for a wacky and interesting year in the Big Ten and across the college football landscape, doesn't it?
Always, and it's top heavy as usual. You look at Alabama, they struggled with Texas, but Georgia looks to be the cream of the crop. And, the thing about the Big Ten is, they don't do well a lot in the non-conference. And then these teams, for example, Northwestern, loses to Duke a few years back and then wins the West. Somebody's got to win it. And keep an eye on Minnesota. This Minnesota was a team that I said might be one of my surprises to win the West. And PJ Fleck's got them playing pretty good football up there, and they look like, really, they haven't played anybody either, but they look like they're playing good football. So, but it is weird when you start playing each other in conference. Michigan State, for example, had no business being 4-3 against Michigan the last 7 years, but they found a way. So when it gets into Big Ten play, you never know what's going to happen. So, but yeah, Wisconsin was a disappointment. Iowa, they got to do something about that offense. It's unbelievable how bad they are. It's literally one touchdown in 2 games, and that was, I think, a 16-yard scoring drive after a blocked punt. So, Mike, they've got serious issues down there. But as you know, going back to 2016, if you go down there and play that kind of game where they want to muck it up and it's going to be a low-scoring game, their defense can keep them in games. So don't take anything for granted and play your best football, man. Be prepared to get everybody's best shot in the Big Ten because everybody's coming for you.
Here with us today on our Game Day segment has been Chris Balas from the Wolverine. Chris, always a pleasure to have you join us, and we look forward to that next visit later in the season.
Anytime, Mike. Thanks for having me.
On Quick Hits today, Jim said at his presser on Monday that Donovan Edwards is working through something. It sounds like maybe an ankle sprain. Those things are day to day, so we'll see if he's ready to go on Saturday. If not, we will probably see a lot more of impressive freshman C.J. Stokes. There is no reason to use Donovan if that ankle is bothering him even in the least. Jim said he hopes to have Carson Barnhart and Nakai Hill-Green back in action too. Here are a few game day notes of interest. Michigan is 2-0 against UConn. The first meeting was here in Ann Arbor on September 4th of 2010, a 30-10 Michigan win. We last met at their place on September 21st of 2013, a much closer game than expected, but a 24-21 Michigan win. Jim Mora is in his first year as head man. He is 46-30 overall in 7 years as a college football coach. Last year was a disaster for the Huskies. They ended the season winless. They returned 7 starters on offense, 10 on defense. They also have a slew of players they welcomed in via the portal. Their last bowl appearance was in the 2015 St. Petersburg Bowl against Marshall. They lost 16-10. The weatherman says it's going to be partly cloudy with temps in the 80s on Saturday. There is a 23% chance of a stray shower or thunderstorm in the afternoon. I mean, who knows? Last week at this time, there was an 8% chance of rain forecast, and we all know how that turned out. Saturday's game is a 12 noon kickoff. Next week, we finally get the Big Ten season underway. The Maryland Terrapins will visit the Big House with their very talented and explosive offense. It will be the best test of this young season for Michigan. On Tuesday's Visitors Edition of the show, we will hear from the legendary radio voice of Maryland football, Johnny Holiday. He's a great guy, always fun to have on the show. Then on Thursday's Michigan Game Day, Our scheduled guest is beat writer Aaron McMahon from MLive, so make sure you join us. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Think victory, beat UConn. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue.
Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!